Adrian Rurafei.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. O te rā, tēnei a hau tuku mihi atu kia koutou ngā iwi o te hiku o te ika. Kia Ngāti Kuri, ngai tākoto, te rarawa, te aupauri, anei a hau e uri o ngā puhi o Ngāti Kahu anō hoki, e tuku mihi atu kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. O te rā, mihi atu a au kia koutou, ngā kai kōrero katoa e tuku atu o koutou kōrero, kairo te ware nei. Mr. Speaker, I just want to first start off by saying, acknowledging all of the iwi involved in this bill today in the House. I want to echo the words of the previous speaker, Matua Pita Praone, about the extension of the hand in this case. I remember when, Mr. Speaker, when I was part of my iwi Ngāti Apa's claim, the then Minister Mark Burton said these words, that every iwi that settles their claim performs an act of generosity to New Zealand. And in support of what the member Pita Praone has just said, I'd like to repeat those words and apply them to the iwi involved in this bill, ngā iwi o te hiku. So today, Mr. Speaker, I also think it's important to recognise the considerable effort that has gone into this major bill, involving many parts. I understand one of the biggest bills to ever come into the House. I think acknowledgement of the Crown and all of the iwi negotiators in bringing this bill, this settlement together, need to be acknowledged, and I do that today. I also acknowledge all of us that have whakapapa to Tai Tokerau. So far, I am the 5th speaker in this debate, sir, of around 10 speeches with whakapapa from Tai Tokerau, and maybe there's one more coming, I'm not sure. If so, then the majority of the speakers today, sir, have been from Tai Tokerau. So I think that's something to be celebrated, because one of the frustrating things, sir, about sitting in the gallery, and I've been there when a settlement bill has gone through the House, is that you don't get to reply. And quite often I know there will be some people sitting in the gallery who would love to reply, notwithstanding the former member, Honourable Shane Jones, I'm sure, sir. I say within this bill, sir, which will be split into a number of, into 5 different bills, I understand. So each one of the iwi will have their own settlement bill and then settlement legislation. Sir, I want to turn my attention to 2 features of this bill, namely cultural redress and the collective redress elements. So the collective redress element must have surely taken a lot of discussion for 4 iwi. I know what it's like at home in my hapu and iwi to get one iwi to agree on something, but to get 4 iwi to have, you know, to agree on a collective redress element such as the Crown Forest licence land and the arrangements that are in this bill, which will set out quite clearly arrangements for its future management and the benefits derived from that Crown Forest land. Also, I want to mention, and it's been mentioned before as well, but the arrangements for Te Onero Atohe board. And so each of the iwi will participate on that board along with local authorities with 50% representation from iwi and 50% representation from local bodies, but decision making having a requirement of 70% agreement. That to me tells me that the people who have negotiated this settlement determined that there will be very clear decision-making process, and for the want of a better word, that consensus would probably best to describe the overall function of that board at 70% majority, sir. I think, Mr. Speaker, that I also want to mention Te Korowai and the arrangements, the collective arrangements around that part of the Act as well, sir. It will require also cooperation from all of the participants for that to work. And so I congratulate the iwi of Te Hiku for their determination to use that part of this this bill and this agreement for the future benefit of their people. And that is also the case for the Social Development and Wellbeing Accord, which in a similar vein is part of that collective working together in unity. So I want to acknowledge that as well. There are always fish hooks, I like to call them, in such legislation. And I just want to, just to record that the relationship agreements within the bill, I think that where the Crown says that they will have a taumata rangatira hui each year between the iwi and the minister, but it's also got or. And I get worried when there's an or in these arrangements, or the ministries themselves. And I think it's really important to have recorded that it is at those meetings are at the highest level with ministers, with the decision makers, because my experience tells me that sometimes, sir, when officials turn up to the meetings and not ministers, they are not the decision makers. So I would encourage the government to make sure that it is indeed the ministers that turn up to those meetings. There are a host of cultural redress items, including, and I counted 81 properties to be transferred to Ngāti Kuri, Te Aupōuri, Ngai Tākoto and Te Rarawa. Some of these properties are shared, but I think along with such things as statutory acknowledgements, protocols, fisheries advisory committees, geographic place name changes, and a host of other mechanisms, does mean that cultural reconnection can be a real thing for the iwi involved. And Mr. Speaker, although I have whakapapa from the north, I have spent my entire life in Te Taihauru with my mother's people. But I was happy to have a story relayed to me by one of my colleagues, Calvin Davis, about Murimutu Island, which both Ngāti Kuri and Te Aupōuri have interest. I'm told that the story of Tū Matahina, who was a great warrior and chief who found himself along with his people under siege on Murimutu Island. He asked his people to weave a long flax rope which they then used to guide themselves to the mainland, each one of them stepping in the footsteps of the person ahead of them. Highlighting the fact that all of them had left the island. Through this action, Tū Matahina saved the lives of his people. Sir, this story is about the tenacity of a great leader. It is about survival, it is about the unity of purpose, and it is about protecting the future. I think that in a modern sense, this bill and the work completed by ngā iwi o Te Hiku o Te Ika highlights their tenacity, their unity of purpose and their desire to protect the future for their mokopuna. Nō reira, E te mana whakaere o te whare nei tēnā koe. O tira, e tuku mihi atu anō ki a koutou ngā iwi o te hiku o te ika tēnā koutou. Sir, I recommend this bill to the House.
Mr. Speaker.
Joanne Hayes.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand to